very crucial part of relationships, because if you get married and you cannot have, you cannot have a good sexual relationship with your spouse, then there's no how that marriage can work successfully. Because that's what makes the difference between just mere friendship and you're actually married. So he actually needs to take a step back and ask himself what exactly the issue is. Because if while physical attraction is not all that there is to marriage, it's a very important part of marriage. There are other bits to it. So there's the emotional attraction, whether you connect, heart to heart and all that. There's spiritual connection as well. Yes. But when it comes to the area of physical attraction, it's very important, and particularly for men, because men are very visually driven. So they're driven by what they see. Yes. So he needs to actually ask himself what exactly is the issue. And I would wonder actually, how did he get to the point where he had chosen to get married to her in the first place if there was no physical attraction. So there has to be some form of physical attraction before you get married to someone. On the second bit where he's talking about where she doesn't really respond to his correction, I think he actually needs to also take a step back and ask himself, well, how exactly is he communicating the issues in the relationship? Because sometimes it might be that you think you're communicating, but you're not actually communicating. Sometimes people think that because they're talkers, they're good communicators, but actually the two are not necessarily the same. So you've got to be able to communicate in a way that the other person understands, and actually communicate what is in your heart. Because sometimes people are saying one thing, but they're thinking something completely different. So he really needs to have a sit down with her and ask her, because you shouldn't have to get to the point where you explode in a relationship before your spouse actually gets to understand what the issues are. So I think they've got two major issues there that they've really got to work through before they choose to get married.
Okay, Tommy, before we move to the third red line, Denko from Dr. Mo is saying that marriages have often failed because the concept of feminism has gone deep into the heads of most women. A man feels he's superior to a woman and wants a woman, okay, don't call, just send an SMS. Okay, he's talking about feminism here. Okay, he says, and once a woman does not approach a man with diplomacy and respect, the marriage tends to collapse. Most men reciprocate with humility than women when their women are not proud to them. Unfortunately, most women find delight in commanding and oppressing men. This is totally bad.
That has become quite an issue these days. I think this whole feminism it's a response to what women have seen as oppression of men, so to speak. But from my perspective, I think it has now gone to the other extreme, to the point where now women are finding it hard to conduct a successful relationship with a man. So you've got to be careful about how exactly you balance things in the relationship. So I believe that respect should be two-sided, right? So the man should respect the woman should respect the man. But I also do say to women that respect is to a man what love is to a woman. So while women, a lot of times in a relationship, what they're looking for is that emotional connection, someone to love them, to cherish them, to care for them, that sort of thing. If you love a man and you make him, you keep saying, I love you, but you don't respect him, you're not achieving anything in that relationship at all. So if you're going to relate to a man, you have to speak the language of respect. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. Anything else, no matter all the I love yous you say and all that, it does not work if you don't speak the language of respect. So I think that there has to be a balance. Men need to understand how women got to this place, I would say. Because, there has been this whole mindset in society that, men are superior to women. And I ask myself, where exactly did that come from? At the end of the day, there is a balance. A man has skills that a woman will never have, and the same thing applies to a woman. A woman has skills that a man will never have. So we should not see each other as competitors. We're supposed to be complementers, so complement each other, as opposed to looking at it as, as if we're competing with each other.
Interesting. All right. Okay, red line the third red line that can see.
Third red line. So the third red line is what I call the curse of pornography. So pornography has become a huge thing today. It used to be way back then that if people are looking for pornography, they need to go to like a bookshop and go and look for all kinds of weird magazines and things like that. But now, at the click of a finger on your laptop or even on your phone, it's right there, right? You see, and a lot of times when people get involved in pornography, they don't actually realize that it has a way of affecting marriage. First of all, it's disrespectful to your spouse. when you get involved with pornography. And then the second thing that it does is that it desensitizes you to a natural, sexual relationship with your spouse. So you start, it's like, the more of it you consume, the more of it you want. And then people want to, see all the things that they've seen, pornographic images and all that. They want to import that into the marriage, and then it becomes, it becomes a big problem. So I say, look, that should be a red line as a family that you should not cross, because when you think about unfaithfulness, unfaithfulness and infidelity is not just a physical thing. It first of all starts in the mind. So when people are indulging constantly in sexual fantasies and all that, and it has nothing to do with their spouse, there's definitely something wrong somewhere. And I mean, there was a question that someone asked me on my platform a few weeks ago, which I responded to. He was saying that his wife was so entrenched in pornography, she was not interested in a sexual relationship with him. So she was always like, I'm too tired, I'm too this, I'm too that, and all that. And the minute he goes to bed, she's up watching, pornographic movies, and that's exactly how it affects people's minds. So if you want to have a healthy sexual relationship with your spouse, I would say that pornography is a no-no.
Okay, let me even bring another perspective into that. I've heard lots of people say, or some people say that if you must watch pornography, you should watch together. What's the basis for that?
Well, I've heard that as well, and I ask myself, why in the first place? Why do you need to watch pornography? Why do you need to watch other people having sex to be able to enjoy a sexual relationship with your spouse? You should be enough for each other, and all you've got to do is be creative, but it's like people are looking for, all sorts of esoteric things, and they just feel, if I introduce this and all that, but you should be focusing on your spouse. At the end of the day. So it's something that I absolutely, because it gives a false impression of what a real sexual relationship in a marriage is like. And then because of that, people are disappointed because they feel they're missing out, because it doesn't look or seem like what they see, or what they watch, and all that. So then they start to get disappointed.
Still on the pornography issue, some people would say it's better you watch pornography and masturbate than cheat on your wife. At least it's not unfaithfulness. That was like a trend that was happening. They'd be like, no, I would rather not cheat, but I'll do this and all of that.
That is still unfaithfulness. Unfaithfulness starts from the mind. It's that once you've crossed that line, that word infidelity means you're breaking the trust of your spouse. So if you're doing something that you wouldn't want your spouse to know about, that's already infidelity. You've broken their trust already.
All right, Pedro from Kaduna says, what can I do to save my marriage? Anytime we have an issue, she always mentions I married her for sex only, and I find it painful. For the past 3 months, I didn't look at her side.
Oh dear. Okay, that's a difficult one. It seems to me actually that probably there are some needs that she has that maybe he doesn't quite understand. You see, because one thing that I always say to people is this: men and women's needs are completely different. So if you as a husband are trying to, to meet your wife's needs the way you want your needs to be met, 99% of the time you'll be wrong. And in the same way for women as well, if you want to approach your husband the way you want to be approached, 99% of the time you'll be wrong. So he needs to ask himself, what are the things she's been asking for? So for instance, for a woman, they're looking first for emotional connection. Before you're talking about, the sexual relationship, do you, care for her? Do you spend time asking after her, during the day and all that? Or is it like, no signals coming, no interest, nothing, and then, all of a sudden you expect her to be revving up and ready to go, at night when you get home? There's that whole cultivating that intimacy with your spouse, which is crucial. So it may be that, she's thinking that, well, he's not spending time talking to me, maybe she's a talker, or he's not, building me up emotionally, and then, he wants a sexual relationship. Sex is very important to men, and men feel connected when they have sex. But women want to feel connected before they have sex. And that's the difference. So he needs to find a way to connect with his wife's heart, so that she realizes that, it's not all about the sex. Even though, for him having a sexual relationship with her is his way of connecting with her. But he needs to try to meet her own needs, as well, and try to see maybe there's some pain underneath there, which, she's expressing in that way. And that's why she's talking the way she is. But not looking her way is not the solution, actually. He needs to actually get down to the bottom of what the issue is.
Okay. So now we've done red lines that could save your marriage. Let's talk about deal breakers before you get married.
Okay.
What are some of the deal breakers that, we should know, like, okay, these are some of the things, once you see these things, you should think more before getting married?
That's a very good question. And those are things that I call red flags. So there's some things that maybe they're just desires, it's a nice to have, but if you don't have them, But there's certain things that I would consider absolute deal breakers. First of them is serial unfaithfulness, or chronic unfaithfulness. Because what I say is that, look, marriage is not going to change a person, it's going to only make them more of who they are. So it's going to reveal more of who they are. So anything that you see in someone you're planning to get married to, which is sort of like, you've seen little signs of it, that's a warning flag. And you can be sure that there's a lot more of that iceberg under the surface, which you would discover after you get married. So, unfaithfulness is one of them, for instance. Violence is another one. So, someone who cannot control their temper, and then they get physical, the hitting and, all that sort of thing. I mean, that is an absolute deal breaker, because if someone is prepared to hit you before you get married, once you get married, you're just signing up to become a punching bag. That's the reality. People, because when people come to me and they have issues, with abuse, physical abuse, and I'm like, did you see the signs before you get married? They're like, well, yes, he hit me once, but I thought it wasn't a big thing. If someone can hit you once before, that means there's something that is brewing in there, and you're probably going to see a lot more of it, after. So it's something that you really need to watch out for. Also, someone who is verbally abusive. Some people, they habitually are insulting. When they're upset or they're angry and all that, they say anything and everything that comes to their mind at all. Because you see, the challenge with being habitually abusive is that it degrades the other person. It's a sign of disrespect. And while people may say, well, I was just angry and that's why I spoke that way and all that sort of thing, but it is actually it's something that I would consider a red flag. And then another one is unforgiveness. So if you're in a relationship with someone who finds it hard to forgive, to the point where it's like they're quite vengeful. So if something goes wrong, you do something, they have got to find some way to revenge, to make you feel the hurt that you've made them feel. Yeah. That, I would say, again, is another deal breaker. So it depends on the context of the relationship, but there are certain things that I say, look, when you see them, these are definite red flags, and they're things that you should run away from. So like I always say to people, look, when you're going to get married to someone, look at them as they are, and ask yourself, if this person never changes, will I be happy married to them? And that's what the key is.
All right, more questions for you, Tony. Good morning, thanks for the program. Right now, I'm emotionally broken. I met this guy a year now, thinking that the relationship will lead to marriage. My guy likes fighting outside sometimes, but I told him I am no longer interested. How can I go back to him? I still have fear he might not stop this when we get married. I love him. His character changed ever since I told him that since I told him that, Ma, do you advise I go back to the relationship? He has other good characters, but only fighting, that's my main problem. Thanks.
That's I would say that for me, I would say that's a deal breaker. That's something that he needs to go and deal with. So marriage is not going to deal with that for him. It's something that he needs to go and work on. Okay. While she may say, well, she loves him and all that, but it takes a lot more than love to make a marriage work. Wow. So if you're in a relationship with someone who has no control over their temper, to the extent that they fight, because what she's saying is he's fighting in public. If he's going to be fighting in public, I mean, that in itself is an embarrassment. But if he will fight in public, you can imagine what will happen when you are at home with such a person. So I would say it's actually a blessing for her. She may be hurting now emotionally, but she will heal, and she really does need to move on.
All right, several questions. This one wants to know if it's right and safe to get contracts from an ex.
Contracts from an ex? Yeah. So basically to do business with an ex?
Yes.
Well, it depends on what the basis of that business is. Okay. So one, your spouse needs to know that this is an ex. Okay. And then secondly, you've got to be certain that this person is not looking for, sexual favors or a comeback or two. So if it's strictly a business arrangement, then you conduct it as a business arrangement. There's no issue with that at all. But if it looks like they're looking for something that's a bit more, then I would say your relationship is probably worth more than
if the spouse refuses.
If the spouse refuses, then I would say no.
Okay, because a lot of people run into this kind of issues where you want to do something with an ex and your spouse says, no, I'm not comfortable with it, and you're like, oh, but look at the benefits, look at the gains, look at the profits, and it's like, I'm not comfortable, and then it becomes a big issue.
Really, there are gains from that particular venture.
Even if there are gains, but you see, ultimately, your spouse's opinion matters.
Okay.
And that's really what the key is. Your spouse's opinion matters because you need to ask yourself, would you like to win the contract and lose your marriage?
Okay.
That's the thing. So, there has to be a balance. There has to be a balance. And I would say, if your spouse is not comfortable with it, then it's probably best for you to avoid that relationship altogether.
Okay, I agree with your guest absolutely. First and foremost, I asked myself, how will I make this marriage work? I decided to see a shrink. I read marriage magazines and I listened to people on TV. All this has helped my marriage to work. As couples, you must first identify the problems before the solutions.
Absolutely right. Absolutely.
So it's actually advisable to see counselor shrinks over time. How often should one be doing this if you're in a marriage?
Well, if you're in a marriage, it's really when there's an issue. So when there's an issue, if you don't have an issue, then that's absolutely fine. There are issues which I call radioactive issues, right? So when it has become an issue such that you cannot sit down and have a constructive conversation about it, there's always some form of explosion, or as a couple you cannot get beyond the point where you are with that conversation. Then that's the time that you actually need to invite someone in.
All right, I thought I was getting this call. Please feel free to call us if you have any question, if you have any contributions. Tommy will handle all of that. What of a woman who don't want? What about a woman who doesn't want any joke? I'm just reading verbatim.
Right.
Who doesn't want any joke before sexual relations, even though you intend to do so before asking her for a sexual relationship?
She doesn't want any.
Doesn't any joke? As she doesn't want to talk.
I don't understand.
What does that mean? She doesn't have a sense of
No,
humor.
because we're saying something about women wants to get connection before they
Yes.
get into the sexual relationship.
Yes.
But since some women don't even want.
Well, you have to adapt to your spouse.
All right. Okay, let's take this call. Hello, good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
I'll turn down the volume on your TV set and ask your questions. Yeah.
My name is Gladys.
Yeah, go ahead, Gladys.
Concerning my relationship,
Mm-hmm.
I met this guy like 8 years ago, and he actually saw me through school. He was in charge of my school fees and the rest and all that. He promised marriage after school and all that. But I found out like last month, before my final exam, a week before my final exam, I found out that I had already gotten a girlfriend now, and they've already done the necessary rights and all that. So nobody told me. I found out on Facebook. I mean, he was there. He told me to have a bouquet, and I felt that we were going to have it like, we're going to end up together and all that, but they just left me. I don't know. I never thought it had for me. I never did. So, I don't know.
Tell me you
I
had
don't know that I'd like to carry on. Because right now, I'm so scared. I don't have to get myself involved into a relationship anymore, like, truly scared. Please, I need your advice.
All right, just listen up. Tommy will advise you.
That's that's a very, very difficult place to find yourself in. So essentially, someone you've been in a long-term relationship with,
Yes.
and then the person turns out to be unfaithful. It's unfortunate, but the sad reality is she's just going to have to find a way to move on.
and continue.
That can be difficult, and it will take time because if you really loved that person, it would take time for your heart to heal. So I would say to her, first of all, don't jump into another relationship on the rebound just because this one has failed and all that. Take your time, let your heart heal, but also don't cast all men in that whole mindset of all men, because people get into that mindset of all men are unfaithful because of one relationship that they've had. I always say that it's unfair for you to punish your spouse for the sins of your ex.
Right.
So don't think because that person has done that to me, everyone else is like that. You've got to localize the issue. But then again, you've got to really take your time in choosing the next time around. But it's difficult, but her heart will heal.
Considering the fact that she said he was unfaithful and she was not aware, is it possible? Because this is something that people always argue about. There's always the saying that if a guy is cheating on you or if a lady is cheating on you, you would know. Some people argue, you won't know. Some argue, you will know, you will feel it. There's a way it will happen. Really, what exactly is it? Do you know? Is it possible that you would be in a relationship and someone would cheat on you and you would never guess?
I think it's very possible. It's very possible. If they're very good at pretending And if, for instance, you're not in the same vicinity, so if she was in school, for instance, then if you're not in the same vicinity, unless you're a mind reader, how would you know? That's the thing. I mean, I don't actually buy the whole idea of you will know. You know, I don't actually buy that.
So there's nothing like that intuition that they say, oh, a woman always knows. You would feel it in your bones.
I don't think so. I mean, there might be signs. So, for instance, someone who is very often not available to speak to, you know, you're trying to reach them at certain times of the day, and you know they're just not available. Maybe around the evening, so they don't want you to call them, but you know they want to call you. You know, things like that, or they don't want you to come and visit. They always want to come and visit you. You will get that sense that maybe they're hiding something. But if they don't give any of those signs, then it's hard to know.
Okay, let us take this call. Hello, good morning to you.
Hello?
Hello, good morning. What's your name? Where are you calling us from?
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, ma'am. Turn down the volume on your TV set.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, ma'am. We can hear you.
Hello, this is Mide from Ogun State.
Okay, Mide.
Okay, Midday, please call us back. Just to remind all of you, if you must call in, turn down the volume on your TV set so we can hear you loud and clear. We wouldn't be having feedback issues. Good morning to you. Hello, good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Yeah, what's your name? Where are you calling us from?
Hello.
Hello, good morning. We can hear you.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning to you.
Hello, good morning.
All right, try and call us back. I don't know. I think it's interference with the. Okay. Another question one of the viewers sent in here is that how can you avoid family interference?
How can you avoid family interference? The first thing is you've got to agree as a couple that you need to avoid family interference in the first place. Because a lot of times when family interference becomes a problem, it's because, you know, one spouse has an idea of just how much they want their own family to be involved, and the other spouse does not agree. You know, so that there has to be a discussion as to how involved both of your families should be in your relationship. That's the first thing. And I always say that it is your responsibility to protect your spouse from interference from your family. It's unfair for instance, for a husband to leave his wife to fight things out with his sisters or his, you know, mother, or, you know, that sort of thing, or vice versa. You know, so you as a man should set the boundaries around your home as to how involved they should be within the family, and the same thing for you as a woman as well. You should set appropriate boundaries. So that the bottom line is agreement. When there's no agreement, that's when the difficulty arises, because, you know, then people, you know, it's like, you know, you find someone who feels, well, you know, my mother can come in, you know, and, you know, say whatever she wants to say, run the home as if it's hers, you know, that sort of thing. It means as a man you've not taken your position to actually protect your wife, recognizing the fact that in order for your marriage to work, you have to change the character of your relationship with your family, your initial family. So you've got to actually realize, I've stepped into a new phase of life now, and they have to adapt.
Of course they should. All right, let's take another one. Good morning to you.
Hello, good morning.
Turn down the volume on your TV set, please. Good morning. Go ahead.
Okay, good morning. This is Mide from Ogun State.
Go ahead, Midday.
Yes, this is a relationship. What do you do in the situation whereby you're in a relationship and you caught the person, not that you really caught, you just, like, you saw one of his messages that you chatted with the lady, and you see that he was trying to, like, ask the lady out, and this is a relationship that you've been to for, like, maybe 3 years or so. And he now saw his message, trying to chat up with another lady that how can they be talk, that he loves the person and all of that. So and asking him, he was like, actually just PT. Like when he was asking the lady out for the first time, the lady was wasn't taking it serious. That he just wants to pay back to, like, I don't understand. So no excuse anymore. But actually it was like a story is not going to happen again. That it was just a joke. Can you really see that it was a joke, or?
All right.
So how can someone understand?
All right, Tommy, listen up. I will respond to you.
Mide, listen up.
Okay. So, I mean, if in this situation, I mean, that's not the sort of thing that you joke with. If you're serious about the relationship that you're in currently, you don't. That's not the kind of thing that you joke with. So I would say it wasn't actually a joke. I would say that, look, it's just an excuse. what he's saying is just an excuse. If you value the relationship that you're in, you would not have the time to, or the propensity to start seeking to, chat other people up and all that, because that is unfair to the person you're in a relationship with. My honest advice to her, just move on.
Okay, I have a question about trust in relationships. Now, say a couple are dating and then, trust get broken. Maybe one person cheats on the other and eventually they decide, okay, we still want to work it out and all of that. Do you think that marriage can ever be successful, or that relationship can ever be successful? Because people always say once you've broken the person's trust, it takes quite a very long time. And when I say long, I mean really, really long, because any reminder or any incident could remind the person of what happened in the past and all that. Do you think any relationship that the trust has been broken before can work eventually?
It can work if both parties are committed to making it work. So first of all, the person who has been offended must realize that, well, yes, there will have to be, sort of like, some time for healing of their heart, and also they need to realize that, there's a tendency for them to adopt what I call hypervigilance, which is every single thing they see, they think is a sign of, maybe this person is cheating on me again. So, all their senses are up, and because of that, they might react to things that they shouldn't be reacting to in the first place. So they've got to be sensitive to that. And on the other side, I always say that the person who has been unfaithful, if they want to win that person's trust back, because they have to win it back, they've got to be prepared to do what it takes to win it back. So I say things like, for instance, if you've been in a relationship and you've been unfaithful, this whole thing of, my fiance cannot touch my phone, or cannot touch my laptop, can't see, all that sort of thing, you're setting boundaries around yourself and all that. If you're really, really prepared to make that relationship work, then you've got to be an open book to that person, because there's a lot of work that's involved in winning their trust back. It won't happen in the day, but it can happen, and I've seen, people heal their relationships and they end up stronger at the end of the day, but they both got to be committed to it.
How much backlash are you allowed to take from the person you offended? Because most times it's almost, remember you cheated on me, you have a fight, remember you cheated. How much backlash? Because I feel like at some point in time it becomes tiring, there's only so much you can take. So how much backlash are you allowed to take?
That's part of the challenge, and that's why I was saying both parties need to be committed. Because if the person that was offended keeps dredging it up, then it's never going to heal. It's just going to be an open wound that they keep opening up each time. So if they are committed, then they really got to know what steps they need to take, and one of them is not constantly dredging that thing up. If it's forgiven, then you need to put it in the past. You're not going to forget, but you've got to just decide that, well, that's in the past now, I'm giving you a clean slate, so give them the benefit of the doubt from this point onwards. But if you keep using it as a tool to get your way in the relationship, then it's not going to work.
All right, tell me, I don't know, maybe we'll take one or two last questions. I'm sorry, there was power outage when I was watching. I don't know if you responded to my question. Okay, fine, I'll repeat your, I'm not sure I read your question. Okay, please re-answer. How about masturbating instead of cheating when your wife is pregnant and not willing or allowing you to have sex with her?
The question I would ask is would you be willing to tell your wife that you're masturbating instead of having sex with her?
Okay.
And if the answer is no, then absolutely that simply means that you're breaking trust with her again. Instead, you should have a conversation, because